So this video covers from page 58 onwards in my copy of A Doll's House, where towards the beginning of Act 3 we've just seen the Helmers return, converse with Mrs. Lind, and then Nora and Torvald alone. Now, we said that the two scenes, if you like, or the two sections within this scene serve as a kind of a delaying measure, a tension-building measure from Ibsen. And of course that is true. However, there is more to it than that. If we think about the structural purposes of them, it's more than just cheap tension adding. First of all, in the previous scene, I think we learn a lot about the worst side of Helmer. And I think it sheds another new light on their relationship. Earlier on in the play, I think it was possible for us to see their relationship as relatively playful, or at the very least that Nora was willing to play along in the interest of marital harmony, of harmony within the marriage. But I think that in that previous scene, we see now that in a sense the scales have fallen from Nora's eyes, and she can no longer bear to look at Torvald, to touch him, to be near him. It's as if she is in a sense repulsed by him. Now partly, of course, that can be down to his frankly rather leery behaviour, the way in which he seems not to be able to keep his hands off her at this point, after she's performed her dance at the party. But I think partly also it's fueled by the tremendous guilt that she feels, that she believes that she is about to be found out, that he is about to read the letter from Krogstad, and she feels like her marriage is about to collapse. But either way, it is revolting. If we think about the play in feminist terms, I think again it demonstrates just how suffocating he is, and just how sympathetic I think that we can be to her possible desire to escape from him. So, we'll begin then now with the entry of Dr. Rank and the stage direction. A knock is heard at the outer door. Nora starts in surprise, and perhaps guilt and fear, perhaps expecting Krogstad, and says, "Did you hear?" Helmer goes into the hall and calls, "Who is it?" Rank replies, outside, "It's me. May I come in for a moment?" Now Helmer is not happy about this. Remember, he was just in the middle of trying to coerce his wife, we think, into having sex with him. And so he replies with this fretful whisper, "Oh, what does he want now?" And then calls aloud, again revealing his hypocrisy, as we saw with Mrs. Lind and him a little while ago, a few moments ago, and calls to him, "Wait a minute," and then he unlocks the door. Now, for a second time, we see him with the key here. We get again said that was symbolic of the control that he has. And of course, in the previous section, the fact that he locks them in again reinforces this idea of him and of men as a whole as being almost like the jailers, the controllers, the imprisoners, if you like, of women. Anyway, now that he is being hypocritical and nice again, he says to Dr. Rank, "Well, that's kind of you not to pass by our door." He says, "I thought I heard your voice, and felt as if I should like to look in." He gives a swift glance around. Now, the implication there is, did he hear something of the conversation that was going on? Obviously, we don't know, but that's a possibility. He looks around then and says, "Ah, yes, these dear, familiar rooms. You're very happy and cosy in here, you two." Helmer says, "It seems to me that you looked after yourself pretty well upstairs, too." Now, happy and cosy in here. There's a couple of things going on. Again, is it ironic? Does this again reveal the difference between the public image of their marriage and the actual reality of it? But then again, is Rank being ironic? Because of course he knows that Nora is a bit flirtatious, perhaps not as virtuous as she should be. So there is that possible option here too. Again, though, as I say, we're reminded of the kind of gulf between appearance and reality. Rank replies then excellently, why shouldn't I? Why shouldn't one enjoy everything in this world, at any rate as much as one can and as long as one can? The wine was capital, especially the champagne. So you notice that too? It is almost incredible how much I managed to put away. Now, why then was Rank enjoying himself? He knows that he's about to die. Clearly he wants to go out with a little bit of a bang and to enjoy his last days of relative health. And clearly, judging by the amount he drank, clearly he enjoyed himself greatly. When Nora adds that remark, Torvald drank a great deal of champagne tonight too. There's a kind of implied criticism here that perhaps the reason why he was acting so badly before Rank came in was that he was obviously in fact drunk, and that was what was causing him to be making this wild pass at her. Rank plays the innocence and says, did he? And Nora replies, yes, and he is always in such good spirits afterwards. Now, is this Nora playing along just as she used to do before? Is this now Nora being increasingly sort of sarcastic and biting about her husband? Is the implication here, well, when Torvald is drunk, it always makes him behave in this particularly offensive way? Who knows? Rank, though, obviously doesn't understand that layer of subtlety, because he replies, well, why should one not enjoy a merry evening after a well-spent day? Helmer says, well spent? I'm afraid I can't take credit for that. I think the joke there, perhaps, is about money. I think that he's implying that this has been very expensive, is the joke there. Rank claps him on the back, sort of jovially, and says, but I can, you know. And Nora says, Dr. Rank, you must have been occupied with some scientific investigation today. He says, exactly. Just listen, little Nora talking about scientific investigations. We're back to the old misogynist, patronising Helmer, who can't conceive that a woman might ever take anything seriously. It's important that we're reminded of this now. Of course, obviously, there was a lot of reference to it earlier on in the play, but it's very important that we're reminded about this now, because clearly he is about to see his wife in a very new light. Rank, though, plays along, I beg your pardon, and Nora ignores Helmer and simply says, and may I congratulate you on the result? Says, indeed you may. Was it favourable, then? The best possible for both doctor and patient, certainty. Firstly, of course, he is both doctor and patient, because the patient is himself. And certainty, the implication then here is he has just received the news, or rather he's just completed his diagnosis, whichever way around you look at it, of the fact that he is now entering the final stage of his illness and that he's about to die. Now Nora picks up on this and so quickly and searchingly asks him, certainty? To which he replies, absolute certainty. So wasn't I entitled to make a merry evening of it after that? Yes, you certainly were, Dr. Rank. Now, it's interesting here because Helmer is allegedly Rank's friend here. Nora, as the wife, is the sort of the accessory, the sort of spare part. And yet actually she is the one that Rank has confessed to, not her husband. And so in a sense Helmer is largely oblivious of actually the undertones to this conversation. He does not in fact know, he obviously knows that his friend is ill, but he does not in fact know that he's now entering the end of his life. He, without recognising the seriousness, says, I think so too, as long as you don't have to pay for it in the morning. Oh well, one can't have anything in this life without paying for it. More little sort of financial joking there. Nora says, Dr. Rank, do you like fancy dress balls? Yes, if there is a fine lot of pretty costumes. Tell me, what shall we two wear at the next? Little Featherhead, are you thinking of the next already? Again, of course, Torvald continuing to be patronising as ever. Now, Dr. Rank, of course, picks up on the we two thing. Now, if Nora knows that Dr. Rank is about to die, is she then implying that she is now thinking about her own death too? In other words, is she perhaps thinking of suicide as a potential way out of her problems? That is a possible interpretation, and there are increasing little hints, I think, in the preceding sections when she talks to Krogstad, for example, and elsewhere, that that is increasingly something that she is prepared to consider. So, Rank, though, plays along and says, we too, yes, I can tell you, you shall go as a good fairy. And Helmer, laughing rather in imagination, says, yes, but what do you suggest as an appropriate costume for that? And Rank, the charmer, says, let your wife go dressed just as she is in everyday life. Flirtatious in front of Torvald, really. I don't know whether perhaps he thinks that he's too drunk to notice, whether he thinks that because he's dying now it doesn't matter, I don't know. But Helmer plays along quite friendly and says, that was really very nicely said, but can't you tell us what you will be? Yes, my dear friend, I have quite made up my mind about that. Well, at the next fancy dress ball I shall be invisible. We know by invisible he means dead. Helmer, still ignorant, says that's a good joke. He says, there is a big black hat. Have you never heard of hats that make you invisible? If you put one on, no one can see you. Of course, joking here, but again, Nora understands, talking about death. Helmer suppresses the smile and says, yes, you're quite right. But I'm clean forgetting what I came for. Helmer, give me a cigar, one of the dark Havanas. With the greatest pleasure. He offers him his cigar case. Rank takes the cigar and cuts off the end. Thanks. Nora strikes a match. Let me give you a light. Rank says, thank you. She holds a match for him to light his cigar. And he bids his farewell and says, and now goodbye. Goodbye, goodbye, dear old man. Sleep well, Dr. Rank. Thank you for that wish. Wish for me the same. Now, when he thanks Nora, clearly he's taking the sort of sleep well to be a reference to his dying, to sleep well in death. When Nora says again, wish me the same, there is the implication there she's thinking about her own death. And Rank seems slightly surprised by that, because he says you and questions it. Well, if you want me to sleep well, and thanks for the light. He nods to them both and goes out. Again then, another hint for we the audience that perhaps Nora is thinking about her own death. Now, Helmer, having been so frustrated that Rank has interrupted them, now finally seems to have calmed down a little, because in a subdued voice he says, he has drunk more than he ought. Nora, rather absently, because of course she's thinking about other things now, says, maybe. Because Helmer thinks that all his talk about invisibility and black hats was some sort of odd joke. Of course, Nora knows what he really means, and that's why she's not quite listening. Helmer takes a bunch of keys out of his pocket and goes into the hall. Now, once again, we see Torvald with the keys. Again, we talked about the symbolism of that previously. Yet another quotation that we can cluster with that. But she says, Torvald, what are you going to do there? And he says, empty the letterbox. It's quite full. There will be no room to put the newspaper in tomorrow morning. Now, again, we said that these scenes have been delaying the inevitable, It looks like finally he's about to read the letter. It looks like we're finally getting to the inevitable, and yet Ibsen has another little twist, another little delaying tactic, which means that we're still not quite going to get to the actual revelation about Nora's crime. So, let's see. Nora asks him, "Are you going to work tonight?" "You know quite well I'm not." Whether he's still thinking about sex, not sure. He says, "What's this? Someone has been at the lock." "At the lock?" says Nora, perhaps pretending innocence. "Yes, someone has. What can it mean? I should never have thought the maid. Here is a broken hairpin. Nora, it is one of yours." The implication then that at some point she obviously did consider the desire to get the letter back before she finally came round to her final view, that she wanted the truth to be out anyway. Nora quickly says, "Then it must have been one of the children." He replies, "Then you must get them out of those ways. There, at last I have got it open." And he takes the contents of the letterbox out and he calls through to the kitchen, to the servant in the kitchen, Helen, put out the light over the front door." He goes back into the room and shuts the door into the hall. He holds out his hand full of letters. "Look at that! Look what a heap of them there are!" And he turns them over. Still Ibsen is delaying the inevitable. "What on earth is that?" he asks. It's ambiguous. We can all think about what Nora would be expecting him to be surprised by. She's gone over to the window. That's interesting. Is she looking outside? Is she looking at freedom? It's not something I think we've seen from her before, so it's instructive that she is doing that now. Perhaps she is thinking almost about escape, so symbolically that's quite powerful. She expects the worst, and she cries out, "The letter! No, Torvald, no!" But what he actually finds is 2 cards of Ranks. Of Dr. Ranks. And Helmer looks at them. Dr. Rank. They were on top. He must have put them in when he went out. Is there anything written on them? There is a black cross over the name. Look there. What an uncomfortable idea. It looks as if he were announcing his own death. Now this, you recall, was a sort of code, I think, if I remember rightly, that was agreed earlier. It was how he would signal to Nora that he knew that he was about to die. Nora replies with this and says, "It is just what he is doing." And Helmer replies, "What? Do you know anything about it? Has he said anything to you?" Nora replies, "Yes. He told me that when the cars came, it would be his leave-taking from us. He means to shut himself up and die." My poor old friend. I knew, of course, we shouldn't have him very long with us, but so soon, and so he hides himself away like a wounded animal. If it has to happen, it is best it should be without a word. Don't you think so, Torvald? Helmer walks up and down, and again we see the hypocrisy. A little while ago he was so unhappy to see Rank, and yet suddenly now he can say, "He had grown so into our lives. I can't think of him as having gone out of them. With his sufferings and his loneliness, he was like a cloudy background to our sunlit happiness. Well, perhaps it is best so, for him anyway." Now, of course, again, further irony. The idea of their sunlit happiness, the idea of the appearance that they present before society. But of course, we know that there is plenty of cloudy background, plenty of clouds within this relationship. It's not merely the presence of Dr. Rank dying that is going to have that effect on them. But he dismisses it so heartlessly. Well, perhaps it is best so, for him anyway. But then, if we thought that was heartless, he goes on and says, "And perhaps for us too, Nora. We too are thrown quite upon each other now," and he puts his arms around her. There's an odd thing then, that somehow he thinks it's going to be better for his marriage, that he's not going to have, if you like, this third person in it. Which seems really quite callous, given the news that he's just received. Anyway, he puts his arms around her, perhaps possessively, we might conceive that. And again, "my darling wife." Again, of course, there's irony here. Again, the possessive pronoun, but he goes on and says, I don't feel as if I could hold you tight enough. Do you know, Nora, I have often wished that you might be threatened by some great danger, so I might risk my life's blood and everything for your sake. Now, again, there's a final enormous irony here, because we all know that Nora has already done that for Torvald. Not something, of course, that we would expect a woman to do. He says, in his kind of hegemonic and his sort of patriarchal kind of way, that he wishes that he could play that role as the sort of male saviour. And so when he eventually finds out that she's already done that in reverse, he's going to be even more unhappy about it. Anyway, Nora disengages herself, so once again we see that she's sort of freeing herself from his touch, and says firmly and decidedly, and of course that's important because she has made her mind up. She now knows that at the very least she wants the truth to come out. We'll think later about whether there's anything else that she's yet decided. Whether, for example, she's already decided to leave, whether, for example, she has decided to take her own life. Again, it's slightly ambiguous, it's not quite clear what it is that she has decided, but she certainly resolved that something has to happen, something has to change. So, she tells him that he must read his letters, and he says, no, not tonight. I want to be with you, my darling wife. And so in spite of everything, it's as if he is returning to the emotions that we first talked about when he came in with her, as he is trying to almost force himself upon her. And Nora, slightly shocked by this, says, with the thought of your friend's death? He says, you are right. It has affected us both. Something ugly has come between us, the thought of the horrors of death. We must try and rid our minds of that. Until then, we will each go to our own room. So finally, he has the decency to accept that there is not going to be any sex in the house that night. Just as an aside here, the reference to them having their own rooms, very much a common thing for sort of middle and upper class couples at this time, that you would sleep separately and only access one another's rooms, mainly the man going into the woman's, if you were in fact actually going to do anything other than sleeping. Again, left to your imagination there. Now, Nora actually seems positively grateful for this, because she kisses, because she's hanging onto his neck now. In other words, that she is, perhaps relieved that he is finally going to actually go to bed. He's going to leave her alone. We shall see. And says, good night, Torvald, good night. He kisses her on the forehead, again, perhaps you might say childishly, and says, good night, my little singing bird. Sleep well, Nora. Now I will read my letters through. He takes his letters and goes into his room, shutting the door after him. And now, finally, we are about to approach the moment. Finally, this is about to be revealed. And what we're left with here is another of these very short but very, very structurally important soliloquy type moments, where important things will be revealed. Looking first then at the stage direction, it says that Nora gropes distractedly about, perhaps despairing then at what she knows is about to happen, or about what's happening next door. She seizes Helmer's domino, his jacket, throws it round her. That's interesting. Is she suddenly feeling cold? Is she feeling an urge for perhaps protection, from masculine protection? Difficult to see exactly what that might symbolise. Is it simply fear? Who knows? But she says in a quick, hoarse, spasmodic whispers, never to see him again. Never, never. Again, think about the fractured structure here. She puts her shawl over her head. Never to see my children again either. Never again. Never, never. Oh, the icy black water, the bottomless depths. If only it were over. He has got it now. Now he is reading it. Goodbye, Torvald and my children. She is about to rush out through the hall when Helmer opens his door hurriedly and stands with an open letter in his hand. Now, we'll leave that there for this video in terms of the coverage. We'll start with the actual conversation that they have in the next one. But I think here again it becomes increasingly clear that what she seems to be talking about, it certainly looks like suicide by drowning. On the other hand, of course, it could be more symbolic, in the sense that she feels like this imagery represents the death of her marriage and her life. Difficult to debate which, but if we think about what she was just saying to Dr. Rank about the fact that she would be sleeping, as it were, and he would too, I think we can be moderately clear that it is in fact her death that she is now considering. And so on that note then, on page 62, we'll end this section.